Hi everyone, it's Raina. So this video is if you have your sun in Sagittarius and Pisces rising. First and foremost, both of these signs are mutable, which means that you probably have a great deal of flexibility in your basic personality traits. And I think that's a good thing because it allows you to adapt to different situations. And because you have Pisces rising, the need to adapt to different situations may actually be something that you learn quite early in life because the rising sign to me can indicate the early environment that you came up from, is it from or with, and the influences and how you, uh, I don't know, how you chose to cope with this situation. Because both of these are mutable signs and the distance apart from them, they form a square, Sagittarius and Pisces. And this will not be true of every combination of this sun and rising sign because it does depend upon the degree span. You'll have to look at your chart generator. If it does include the aspects, it will tell you if it officially forms a square or not. But regardless, I still think the same themes apply. But just to mention about the square is an irritating angle, and it means that it there are like two things that kind of clash, create this sense of friction, and it can even be described, I think, as an obstacle, a blockage. So basically, how that would manifest when you're looking at these 2 points is that you feel frustrated about how you're perceived or even how you choose to carry yourself and who you really are. And I feel like it's kind of like when you're an adult, and I would say, especially when you've had your first Saturn return, so 30 and beyond, you I feel like this is the time when it might really come out where you feel like, why do people still think X, Y, and Z about me and I'm really this? And you don't realize that you might still be having this, you could call it a facade. I call it a defense mechanism that causes you to do certain things, say certain things, act in certain ways, and make people have that impression about you. And even like dressing, the rising sign can indicate the type of appearance you have and how you dress and things like that. And that might be something that irritates you as well about yourself. Like, why do I do this when I'm really that? I do feel that the influence from the rising sign dissipates after the age of 30. That's my theory. Just based on my own experience, I don't have this. I'm a sun and Sag, but I don't have this rising sign, so I can't speak on that specifically. But anyway, let's talk about that appearance. Let's talk about that way that you carry yourself. So Pisces is a mutable water sign, so right off the bat, you might be the kind of person that's kind of freaky in that you can look differently. I no, maybe that's wrong, incorrect grammar. Look differently. Look different every time people see you. That you're kind of a chameleon, and you're not even necessarily trying to be or wearing different clothing, although that could happen as well. But just that your physical appearance seems different. Neptune is your ruler. It's the ruler of Pisces. So, and the funny thing is too that we also can talk about the sun's ruler as our ruler, and that's Jupiter, and Jupiter is the ancient ruler of Pisces. So that kind of intensifies the influence of what Jupiter represents. But just getting back to Neptune, um, you might have this, like, situation with being photographed where you do not look like your photographs. Um, in real life, you do not look like that. Like, because photography is Neptunian too. So it could be the people. Like, I remember reading about modeling. I wanted to be a model when I was younger, when I was a lot younger. And I remember reading that the model is someone who a lot of times they photograph differently than they look in real life. And I was thought that was kind of an fascinating thing that can happen, where it's almost like magical that the screen, or the well, it's not the screen, but the image is different from the actual person. The reason I said screen is I remember people talking about these famous stars, like you could say somebody like Marilyn Monroe or something, and they said the screen loves her, meaning that, there's something about, so there's some magic that takes over when the person is filmed that makes them larger than life, or whatever you want to call it. So you may have that same relationship with film photography, where things are, I was going to use the word distorted, but it could be more beautiful or whatever. But there's an ethereal quality, an aura that can emanate from you that other people get seduced by, but it's not sensual, it's spiritual, it's otherworldly, it's indefinable. The person can have faraway eyes. I have talked about having Neptune in the first house, as that can be similar, just the planet Neptune. Um, and I mentioned, I think in that video, that the eyes can be green, or whatever you call it, like hazel, that they can turn green or gray at different times. But it doesn't have to be that way. It's just that when somebody looks in your eyes, it's like seeing an ocean. It's like, it's very dreamy and spacious and undefined. And it might be hypnotizing, but it's different than Scorpio rising, or Pluto, in that, like Scorpio rising, where there's that sense of a piercing gaze. This is much more of a spaciousness, but it can give other people a sense that you're very in touch with something that is beyond tangibility. And you definitely could have psychic abilities. With the sun in Sag, they call Sag the sage, or you could say the prophet. But I'm not even talking about predictive tendencies. I'm just talking about a love of the spiritual, a love of the religious, and then you combine it with this, which is mystical, the high priestess rising. Maybe I found my title. And so you may have come up or grown up with some sort of tragic circumstances, sometimes some sort of trauma, where from a very early age you could see that even adults were not infallible, that they were capable of being very human, very flawed. And this can be, like, specifically if you came up in a family where there was alcoholism or other addiction issues present in the home, or mental illness of some sort. And sometimes with mental illness, it can be a bit nebulous, if I can use that term, which is Piscean, because, the person may be functioning, but that something isn't right with them. And I've said over and over again that I do believe that the water signs, and I've kind of singled out Pisces and Scorpio, but maybe Cancer too, can be deeply influenced by trauma. And what I was trying to convey is that it's not to say that they may have been targeted more with it, because after all, this is your rising sign. This isn't your sun sign, which I feel is, the most important thing to focus on with the chart. But given that the rising sign dictates the chart, it's very important. It's a pivotal position. And I feel that the water signs take things to heart very deeply. So, what this can look like, having the sun in Sag, can be that over time you evolve and you become more like the sage. And the sage is different than the psychic. You might think that those are synonyms, but I don't feel that they are. I think that the psychic is someone who can be very, uh, can have prophetic dreams or intuitive hits. They may be clairvoyant. They may have all of these psychic gifts, but they're not necessarily able sometimes to translate them in a way that is meaningful at the highest level. And also, there can be great distortion. For instance, a person who is screaming in the middle of the street, and we call them schizophrenic, can be totally psychic, and they may be seeing beings, entities from other dimensions, maybe from hellish dimensions, given the way that they're screaming. But that doesn't mean that because they have these abilities, that they're using them in a way that's going to benefit themselves or others. So the thing is that so you would call that kind of psychic ability uncontrolled. But one of the things that I read once was that there are different types of intuitive people, or whatever you want to call that. And they were saying that some people have great psychic ability, but very little um, wisdom or insight. And so, I think sometimes when you see these readings of people, that famous psychics, and they can communicate with people from the other side and all of that, but they don't really make it about something very deep, that those are the kinds of things. And that's not to put down those people, because they can have great abilities to be able to contact others and things like that. But there are different types. And the reason that that was important to me is because I do not call myself a psychic. And so, as a Sagittarian, I really resonate with this idea of the person who might be wise. They might not be clairvoyant or whatever in that sense, what we call these dramatic psychic abilities, but they have maybe a depth to them, some wisdom. But the thing is, it's like with you, you might have both of these, because you have the Sag and you have the Pisces, so it's like very well rounded. And and yet, with the Pisces part, if there is clairvoyance, if there is some of these, these intense dreams and all of that, that might have been very confusing for you when you were young. And if you didn't have that supportive, uh, like system around you, that might have led to kind of this feeling that something was wrong with you, that you were doing something wrong when you were just being who you were. I think about Edgar Cayce, who was a sun in Pisces, but he lived in an area that was very um, very much populated with fundamentalist Christians who did not see things in that way. And it's no knock on anyone, but there are different schools of thought. And sometimes the people who are psychic, mystical, can be met with a lot of suspicion by people from another type of belief system who find it unsettling, or just in general, even if you have an atheist, if you came from a family of atheists and they thought that that was unsettling, that could be the very same thing where it just is met with a lot of suspicion. So that might be something that you dealt with. But the thing that I think is beautiful is that there is a core theme within yourself of compassion for others, because and maybe total acceptance. And you have to look at other factors for this to see if it will correspond to this. If you have inner planets being a sun in Sag in Scorpio, you may have more suspicion and cynicism, and less, even though it's a water sign, you may have like less tolerance for certain behaviors than normal, because the mutable signs kind of let things ride. But these other people out there, like the Scorpios and things like that, they can be pretty set in their ways about what is acceptable and what is not acceptable, and they might not go for that. But in any case, you might have experienced things where you saw the flaws in people around you, adults, so you didn't have that kind of fantasy. That's which is ironic, because Neptune and Pisces are very idealistic and prone to fantasy. But that might have been a reality check for you, that people can be quite um, flawed and have a lot of problems. I was going to say problematic, and you're very likely a natural healer of some sort, or an artist. And actually, artists, I do think, are healers anyway. So that's a given. And it's possible that it's very hard for you to stay on course because you're open to so much influence. When you have Pisces rising, you have to be very careful about the company that you keep, because you're an open channel and water is very impressionable. So, that song by Stephen Stills just came roaring into my head. Love the one you're with. This idea of being with someone and just being influenced by them, maybe running off with, falling in love with someone that you just meet because you just happen to be with them. This is a combination that is a good segue into how you are in relationships. And I do think that look at the moon sign, look at the Venus sign. The Venus sign will be close to Sagittarius. If your Venus sign is in Capricorn, you're going to be much more selective in who you get with. Um, with Scorpio, you're going to be much more, like, I was going to say withholding, but very, very wary of others. I think Venus and Sag is the one most likely to be freewheeling about things. And look at the moon sign specifically for your emotional nature, because if you do have an air sign or an earth sign, or except for Taurus, or and for the air signs except for Libra, and maybe another fire sign, you're going to be much more detached, or even if you're passionate about the situation, much more into your independence. Because Pisces is a dependent type of a sign. Sometimes Pisces can come across as weak. Now, this is based on the fact that uh, the nature of Pisces is to be very vulnerable and to show that vulnerability. So when I use that word weak, that is only um, a word. It's not really true. A Pisces person can be very strong, can be a survivor, in fact. But the thing that you have to watch out for is if you have been a literal victim of someone else, you have that experience in your life if you've been a victim of abuse. And the temptation can be sometimes with this position to identify with that and to project more of the same. So, somebody who's a victim who believes that this is who they are and they present themselves as a victim, in the extreme case, this could be a, a covert narcissist who is very, um, who goes around and tries to get um, sympathy from other people because they are so disempowered. Okay. Now, I don't personally think that somebody with the sun in Sagittarius is going to bring this upon themselves because Sag, and other fire signs are way too positive and desiring to be free, to kind of fall into this trap. But sometimes, because of other factors, there might be that tendency, that temptation. So I'm just putting it out there for you to think about because even if you're not full blown this way, you still could have aspects of it that tend to rear their ugly heads, individual heads. And you have to kind of fight off the temptation to do this. As you get older, it will be easier because you will identify less with the rising sign. See, this is why I say I believe that, especially when there is a hard angle from the sun to the rising sign, that the person grew up, they might have been like a scapegoat or like the black sheep or a scapegoat. And those are not entirely synonymous. A black sheep can simply mean that they didn't feel like they belonged, that they were totally different. But a scapegoat is one that was actively targeted and everything was blamed on that person. That could very well be you if you have Pisces rising. And what happens is this is just a natural thing that can happen is when somebody is targeted, they're actually given more attention than others in the family, than other siblings. So in a strange way, it makes it like they are the center of attention, but it's negative attention. So what simply happens with a covert narcissist is that as an adult they're still seeking that attention, and they're going about it in the only way they know how, which is to be the victim in their own life. So that's why I think that the person perpetuates that. And they can do that by always having problems, always having some kind of need for being rescued by other people. And so that's what I mean by dependency. But in general, this can be somebody who learns how to live a better way of life because of that positive thinking of Sag. I'm not going to say it might take you until your 30s or beyond for you to get to that point where you're able to let go of that past. Um, but you can do it, and that's why this combination makes for a great life coach and somebody who can point, they can even use their story as a point of inspiration. So, that's one possibility for you. Anything in the healing arts field is a given, and that could include. I could. It's funny because I would say somebody who's an astrologer. That could include somebody who's an astrologer, but maybe they use the tarot, or you could say like the tarot or something. But they have that psychic clairvoyant ability, so they use the tarot differently. When I'm using the tarot, I'm kind of like almost like literal based on what the cards represent. But there are some people, they're reading it like tea leaves. And that's how I feel. It's like those people with clairvoyance or clairsentience or whatever you want to call it. So that those are given. You might not be the kind of person who can thrive in a 9 to 5 job because you have this double mutable energy. It just, Pisces is the fish. You're kind of slippery. You have this, and it can be kind of sketchy, especially when you're younger. You may have problems being honest, you may have problems being truthful. And Sag loves truth, but, Pisces or Neptune, the ruler of Pisces, can represent deception. And the person is simply, just kind of expressing what they were influenced by growing up. And these things, you can grow out of them and you can be like one of the most honest people that you know because you value it and you realize the destructive nature of dishonesty. But really sometimes it can come also the ability, the tendency to lie for some people comes because they were almost forced to if they came from an abusive household, that the truth was not well received. And they were raised by parents who were dishonest too. So all of that kind of thing can be what, you know, precipitates that, and you can grow out of those tendencies. Um, Definitely, also that addictive situation where if you saw it, sometimes people emulate what they see. They see their parents or other caregivers not being able to cope with stress and then just using some sort of mind altering substance to make themselves feel better. And of course, that doesn't work. So they end up, having problems as a result. But sometimes, unfortunately, their offspring will emulate that because they don't have anything else. They don't have any other kind of role model to guide them any other way. But I think that you're able, if you ever have those tendencies, to get past them because the sun is the most important aspect of a person in astrology. So that takes center stage. So, in terms of, I think like if you were to become a teacher, because I think Sages love that kind of thing, that you would want to work in an area that is underserved, an underserved community, and therefore be kind of somebody who can inspire your students. And yeah, so if you travel as a Sag, I think that you love to visit spiritual places, rather than just sitting on a beach and sipping umbrella drinks. I think that you are the kind of person who loves to learn You know, Sag is a lifelong learner, but then you also have that spiritual side to you. And so visiting temples is your jam, or other places, maybe historical churches that are so many years old, and it sounds great. Those kinds of things. Okay, that's what I have for you. I hope that this resonated. If you would like a private reading, the link is below. Take care. Bye.